I'm here by myself. All by myself. No army with me. Army's not going to be here till tomorrow when we come back to kill everybody. And then Hawk literally says, and I'm taking this from the movie, we are few and Voltan has many men. Dude, he doesn't right now. Fucking kill him.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Chat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash the High Abbott.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
Each week we take a look back in time to decide Each week we take a look back in time to decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. Review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, if you like to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, before tonight's recording, I had to take care of my voice. I had to get a lozenge because one of our commissioners is back again. It's Joe. He's our British correspondent who likes to call in. And his voicemails are eloquent. His delivery is perfect. His timing is very professional. And I'm a little bit nervous because he called in again and left us a voicemail. But anytime he comes back, this is his second of 3 commissions. Previously, he had done the soccer film. It was the
Escape to Victory.
He did Escape to Victory. He's doing tonight's film, and then he's doing another very British film. But I was very excited when he wrote in with a couple commissions. And tonight is the first part of it. It is the 1980s sword-and-sorcery adventure, Hawk the Slayer. And he called in again, and now I'm going to just sit back and listen to the smooth tones of a true professional.
Hello, Gene, Big D, and Ash. Self-appointed British correspondent Joe T here with my second commission. To start my message, I think it's important to answer the questions with which you start your great podcast. Did I spend Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster? Do I know what Blockbuster Video is? Well, if, like me, you grew up in a small town in rural England, back in the 1980s, you did not know what Blockbuster Video was. At that time, we did not have a chain of video rental stores that made it out into the countryside. In fact, Blockbuster Video did not arrive in the UK at all until the 1990s, and it never made it to where I lived. The best we could muster up was an independent video store, but definitely not the cool kind, that also doubled as a small grocery store and sometimes a petrol station. Was the perfect movie available for rental? No, it was not. It was never available. Anything you might conceivably have heard of was either already rented, or more likely, never there in the first place. But you know what was available every single time, without fail? Hawk the Slayer. Just imagine taking the best bits of Star Wars, Lord of the Rings and the Seven Samurai, assembling a cast that includes Oscar winner Jack Palance, Patricia Quinn from Rocky Horror, and a veritable who's who of British character actors. Just think of the film you would get. Hawk the Slayer is that film. At this point, I should probably point out that I am not trolling you or the listeners. I know very few people have seen this film, and those that have tend to be British men of a certain age. But almost without exception, anyone who saw it back in the 1980s has very fond memories of it. And although I doubt anyone is fooling themselves that it's a good film, it is a genuine cult classic for many Brits in the truest sense of the word. Why am I commissioning it? Well, both this week and next week's commissions are in honour of my grandma Iris, who turned 100 in 2023. I must confess we expected her to have died by now, but I'm pleased to say she's still very much alive, somehow. Anyway, she has always been and remains to this day a massive movie fan. It was with her that I saw so many great films for the first time, from The Godfather to Aliens. I would have commissioned one of those, but they've already been done. Astonishingly, Hawk the Slayer has not previously been commissioned. I would visit my grandma as a young boy, and my brothers and I would go off to Black Park, just down the road from where she lived, in order to play. Black Park has been used for a filming location for a large number of films over the years because it's right by Pinewood Studios. Goldfinger, Willow and Krull all filmed there, and more recently the Harry Potter movies and Casino Royale. But the movie we always reenacted in our games as kids, in the park, when visiting Grandma, was none of those. Instead, it was another film that was filmed at Black Park, Hawk the Slayer. I recognise, watching the film now, certain questions arise. Why is one of the characters older than his own father? Why steal the money for a ransom if you're not going to pay it? Perhaps most importantly, what's going on with the snake? All of that is just detail, though, or I think as some call it, massive glaring holes in the plot, but it's not about that. Instead, it's all about reenacting a film in the park near your grandma that you've seen hundreds of times because you don't even know what Blockbuster Video is. Tinkety Tonk and down with the Nazis. Good to have you back, Ash. Bye-bye.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your voicemail, and happy birthday to Grandma Iris. 100 years is quite an accomplishment. And yeah, we're lifting a glass to her right now. Joe, as for Hawk the Slayer, I can tell now why Big D came into this recording with so much joy on his face and so much optimism in his notes. He must have listened to your voicemail first.
No, I did not. I did not listen to his voicemail. I was just filled with joy at this film.
You were just independently in the spirit of playing at Black Park without ever having heard Joe's voicemail.
Yes, I think that this movie may have had something to do with the longevity of his grandmother.
Oh
she seems to not take things too seriously. She loves film. This movie could be at the heart of it. And also, ironically, that not many people have heard of this. When I'm going back looking today for to see if Joe had left an email, this movie was requested again by another listener. This is a popular one, Gene. I think it's gonna put our numbers through the roof.
Those two, right? Like the only two people maybe ever we found them.
No, Grandma's going to listen to it. She's going to be a new subscriber.
Fair.
You know, every time people have said they want to open the door into the 2000s because we've done everything from the 80s and the 90s worth doing, I always brought up Hawk the Slayer. And now where are we? Well, Hawk the Slayer is a 1980s sword and sorcery adventure starring John Terry and Jack Palance. The story follows two warring brothers who fight to gain control of a magical sword. According to director Terry Marcel, Hawk the Slayer was not intended to include magic at all and was supposed to be a historical film. In the course of writing the script, he then introduced the magical Mind Stone, changing the overall nature. The film had an initial negative reception, but has since developed a cult following of at least two people. Sequels were planned, but never produced. So, Ash, Big D, we always ask what your memories are of the movie that we're covering. Hawk is a bit more obscure than what we're used to here at Shat the Movies. But Ash, we'll start with you. What do you remember about this movie?
So I am a big fan of the fantasy genre, whether it's books or movies, huge fan. But there's a lot of like fantasy type films that I missed in the 80s. I never saw Conan until you guys did it on the podcast. I never saw Lady Hawk until, spoiler alert, the podcast. Certainly never saw Krull. And Hawk the Slayer, unsurprisingly, is another one of those that I just never happened to come across. Again, thanks to the podcast, I now have seen Hawk the Slayer. I've seen them all. I don't know if there's any others out there. I hope there are not. I hope that this is the last one that I've got to kind of check off the list. I'm still not convinced I'm the better for it, but I'll say I at least had a lot of fun watching it. I just don't know if it was for the reasons that the movie makers wanted me to have fun, which I guess we'll get into in a bit.
Well, before Joe commissioned Hawk the Slayer, I thought the cover art looked pretty familiar and I couldn't quite place it. And then I remembered, aha, I remember exactly where this came from. It came from Rifftrax. And if you were like me in college in the early 2000s, you had to be a fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And then, of course, Rifftrax that kind of came after that. And I remember seeing Hawk the Slayer among the Rifftrax offerings. But even the promise of the hilarious Rifftrax commentary could not entice me to watch this movie. Looking at the cover art, it seemed like more of a pinball machine than a fantasy film, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So thank you, Joe, for exposing me to this wondrous film.
Yeah, it could be a pinball machine or like a tour concert, like a poster advertising. It could be a guitar. You can't tell if he's holding a mic stand in his hand. But for me, Hawk the Slayer, this came out in 1980. So it was too early for me to see it in the theaters. It didn't do very well, so the longevity in the theaters wasn't that long. And this is before video stores were everywhere. So a movie would hit a theater. I think I talked about this with Flash Gordon. It would hit a theater and almost became legendary because you couldn't go and watch it. You couldn't get it. And I think of all the films that have been commissioned, to me, if you distill this movie, Hawk the Slayer, down to what it is, this is, I believe, the heart of Shat the Movies. In this one movie, is it the best one? Is it the biggest hit? No. But this movie has so much that made me happy and brought me joy, even now listening to Joe's voicemail, about what I love about film and I love about this podcast. It's finding gems that you never would have known. And if anybody else, if we can expand to maybe 3 or 4 fans of this film, I've done my job. So this is the distilled version of Shat the Movie, the heart of Shat.
And after listening to this podcast, if you still want to watch Hawk the Slayer, it is free on the Tubi app. So it's actually pretty easy to find. If you get the Tubi app, it's a free download. You can watch it there. And they also have the Rifftrax edition. So if you want to watch it again with the commentary from the Mystery Science Theater crew, that's on there as well. Without further ado, let's hit the trailer.
Enough! 2 blood brothers, out for each other.
You have found the power which is rightly mine. How?
The firstborn brother, they called him Voltan. Enter, Count One. The devil's agent, the servant of evil.
Kill him!
The second-born brother, they called him Hawk. He had one secret weapon, the ancient power of the Sword of Mind, and he was out for revenge.
Last thing you will ever see is the woman you love in my arms.
I am ready. Two brothers, 2 armies, 2 forces of good and evil. Voltan's army, the devil's army, and Hawk's. A dwarf, a giant, an elfin bowman, a witch, and Hawk. Together, they took on the mighty Voltan. Together, they took on the devil's agent. 2 blood brothers, with only blood between them. Beyond the edge of darkness, there is a world of sword and sorcery.
Voltan infiltrates his father's castle and mortally wounds him when he's refused the magic of the last elven Mind Stone. As the old man lies dying, Voltan's brother Hawk enters the castle and is bequeathed a great sword that pairs with the Mind Stone. The sword is now imbued with magical powers and can respond to Hawk's mental commands. Hawk vows to avenge his father and his slain wife Elaine by killing Voltan.
I have to be very honest. My expectations were low when I started this, based off of the poster, based off of Just what I figured it would be. But I gotta be honest, I had no idea how low they should have been. Because let's talk about the set, right? Let's start with the set itself. So if you've never seen it before, which I'm assuming a lot of you out there have not, Hawk hears his father in a room about to be killed by a bad guy. And let's describe that room. My children build like refrigerator box forts. I'm sure we've all done that as children. It looks like that's what they gathered for this was a bunch of cardboard boxes that they put together and then they spray painted it gold. And then there's like this spooky, mysterious water feature that is supposed to have these two really, really creepy gargoyles on either side of it. The problem, though, is that the gargoyles have their faces and their hands like on like a closed fist. Like, do you guys remember like the old school like Olsen Mills or like J.C. Penney family portraits, like where you pose like that? Like, that's what these gargoyles are doing in this background.
Famously, though, just to be fair to J.C. Penney, the hardest thing about portraits is what to do with your hands. So,
yeah, maybe the gargoyles could have figured out something different other than like, I'm going to look at my mom all like charming, right? Because that's the way it came across. And then you've got the sword itself. It's on the wall. It's supposed to be this big thing. It's this giant sword. And on the hilt is just a giant fisting hand, like just sticking out of the back like a giant sex toy. And it was both super bad, but also super amazing. So I was both like put off and then strangely excited for whatever this movie was going to bring.
Yeah.
What's wild is they presented this Mind Stone and the Mind Sword as the sort of mystery that Voltan would kill his own father to solve. He's like, tell me the secret. Tell me, father. There's this stone-looking thing, and then there's a hand on the sword, the Mind Sword and the Mind Stone. What do you do? How does it work, Dad? He's like, I'll never tell you. Then he fucking slays him. So then I think Hawk's journey during the film is going to be to figure out how this all comes together. And it's as simple as get the stone, the hand will do the rest.
Yeah, but I think you guys were expecting this to be a bigger budget film. You have to set your expectations. And right away, the movie establishes, we get a welcome screen. It's going to tell us, a voiceover is going to read. And I just want to check in here. Does this mission statement to you guys, how many, because we're promised something. We are promised, and I want you to agree whether or not we get this. Do we get a story of heroic deeds?
No. Villainy on all parts.
Agreed.
Everyone betrays everyone in this film.
Okay. Is it and this is again, next line, a struggle for the triumph of good over evil?
No, sure, there's a struggle, but I don't know if good wins. I think evil might win out in the end of this one, but struggle, sure. I'll give you that.
Okay. And after all of that, our heroes, they don't seek to do good across the land. They just want more adventures.
Yeah, but that's what you do. That's what an adventurer does. They live for adventure. Do we get a wondrous sword wielded by a mighty hero?
No.
I would classify Hawk as mighty.
I would not call it a wondrous sword.
Wondrous. Yeah, not so much.
And the final line is, legions of darkness stalking the land.
Yeah, that's true. Everyone in this movie is evil. That's true.
Right, so you see right there.
2 out of 6, I think.
Set your expectations. They told you what you were in for. And I'm on board all of this.
But Big D, you mentioned budget constraints, though. And here's the thing. What costs more to make? A cool-looking sword or a sword with a hand that opens up and then there's a light-up orb that flies to it and it catches it? There's some cost savings right there. I need to be the hatchet man in charge of the budget here for Hawk the Slayer. I'll give you a good movie. Give you a great movie.
We'll get to the budget.
We'll spend all that money on blood.
Yeah, you can be my CFO. I'll talk to you. We're going to get to that soon.
Okay.
So I do agree. One of the problems with the budget is the sword, because you hype it up. The opening scroll, it promised us a wondrous sword. It's going to be a weapon. It's got to blow us away. If you hype it up like that, this has to be the ultimate weapon. It's something that's so powerful that people would die to find it. A father would sacrifice his life to hide it from the darkness. I'm thinking maybe the glaive from Krull, that 5-pointed throwing weapon. You could throw it. It would stick into somebody. It would come back. It could just break rocks. It was a badass weapon. You could use it as a melee weapon. You could knock down enemies. I'm thinking maybe Conan's broadsword or something magical like the Sword of Omens and the Thundercats. You got to have something that's big. And Ash, you said it. It is a fucking sex toy. It is a fist like cast, like I could see it in silicone and this in one of our Pornhub exclusives where somebody is taking this handle. The handle is too long. The hilt is too short. The swords are all floppy and blunted tips. The design is problematic. Yes, it is a problem. I agree with that. And the bigger problem is that this is supposed to be the main weapon that's going to go throughout the film. Hawk doesn't even sheath it. He just carries it, and half the time he leaves it on a table, he sticks it in the ground, or he leaves it leaning against a tree. It's going to get stolen.
I would have to review the film, but now that I think of it, I don't know if sheaths exist in this universe, because Voltan also carries his sword around like over his shoulder, kind of like, but always in his hands. They cradle them like babies.
Yeah, I think it's because they all were like working part-time at medieval times and maybe needed to bring them back at the end of the day after they were done filming, because this movie gives off major medieval times vibes. And this is like no shade. I love medieval times. I think it is a blast. My kids and I go once per year in Arlington. We think it's great. But it's objectively like a really cheesy place. And this movie has that same kind of cheesy feel to it. Let's talk about the oath that Hawk makes with the elfin stone. The way that the Lord is stabbed and like no actual blood comes out of him. You know, Gene, we needed you because there was no blood, much less any blood at all. The Hawk animation and the at the start, like completely what happens when you go in and like your winch brings you your potato. And then the music over the credits, I swear to you, this is the exact same track that they play when the falcon is going around the room and the guy's swinging the bag of dead mice or whatever's in there to get him to come back to them. It was strangely charming, but hella medieval times.
Yeah, and the similarities don't end there, Ash. You got lots of people doing activities for no reason, which is always fascinating about medieval times. I'm pretty sure what they do is they do like a star search sort of casting where they're like, what talents do people in Scottsdale, Arizona have? And then they just build a show around that, because a lot of times people in this movie were just doing things and it had nothing to do with the plot. You didn't understand what their motivation was. They just did them to do them. And then you've got the anachronistic technology, right? The technology, you got like machine gun crossbows, but also no sheaths. And that reminds me of medieval times, because medieval times, they don't give you like a knife or a fork. They're like, lords and ladies, we didn't have that at the time, only bowls. But then there's a fucking laser show going on. So I'm not really sure exactly how to take that. And perhaps most significantly, it's the way the bad guys menace people. That is 100% medieval times. They're in curiously banal ways. Like, oh, I'm going to show you by cutting this bread aggressively. Or they'll just threaten neutral and compliant characters. Like a guy will be like, yeah, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. Hawk's right over there. Like, I'm going to fucking scare the shit out of you, man. For no reason.
I need to go back and research. This may have inspired medieval times. This film could be the origin of that. But I agree, Gene. Another tie-in, I've never seen another movie with more camping, like campfires and improvised grills. Everyone was grilling a chicken or something that you would cook at medieval times on the side of the road. You were either getting thrown into the fire, knocked over the fire. I mean, there's camping everywhere, cooking outdoors. We get roadside, some AAA. There's a lot of commerce. This seems like the world of medieval times. But again, you guys, it's not a big, major blockbuster. And I know we say that a lot of times. It's a smaller movie. This budget was below $1 million. This was 600,000 British pounds. I went back and looked. The exchange rate was 1.4 at the time. That's $840,000. So let's be kind. This is the lowest budget film we've ever done. And there are scenes that in the final cut that you would never have in a big film. Like there's a part in the beginning when they're entering into that gold sauna room with the fog machine. He hits the wall and part of the set falls down. They leave it alone because they have to. You know that they're going to be dire constraints and restrictions that they have to put on it because of the budget. There's a part here where we get Renolf. Now, he's been accosted. He's been wounded. He goes to the nuns. They bring him back to health, and he tells them the story of his village getting raided. And I'm thinking, okay, here comes the flashback. We're going to shift into some kind of voiceover narration, and we're going to see the horrible acts that are going on. Nope, no flashbacks. They could not afford it. And this is a vital part of building Voltan's backstory. We need to see him attacking. Imagine Conan the Barbarian. If we didn't see Conan's mom beheaded, if we didn't see them ransacking the villages, You couldn't afford it. So let's just be nice to this film. This isn't even shoestring. This is like student film level.
And take it a step further, they couldn't even show us like a guy getting his tongue cut out. They had that happen off screen with just a shriek. Use your imagination, kids. It's the movies.
But it was PG again. I think the PG explains why there was no blood, or when the mallet falls on top of the hunchback, they don't show it. I think they were trying to walk that fine line and save on the blood budget.
Yeah, and I think that the low budget editing like does kind of make it fun. Are either of you guys ever on TikTok like often?
Gene is.
No, I don't know. I've like recently fallen into like these random TikTok holes where there's this guy that I've come across and I can't remember his name, but he's like this terrible musician. Poor guy. He wears a cape all the time and he has these weird dance sequences in this very low, like gravelly voice. But he makes these like really brilliant music videos that are unintentionally brilliant and they crack me up. And they're just like this. Like they have these fantasy scenes. They have the roadside campfires, the no sheath swords. I mean, it's the whole thing. And I think he's amazing. And I'm pretty convinced he's inspired by Hawk the Slayer now that I've seen this. It's what I thought of the entire time I was watching parts of this movie. And his editing and his low budgetness, like it makes it feel like that kind of like home movie that we would all do when we were kids, like with our friends. And in a way, this feels like this. Like this feels like a bunch of friends got together. I can't believe they had as big of a budget as they actually did, but you know, I think it's kind of sweet.
So now Hawk is responsible for a TikTok stream. It's responsible for medieval times.
Prolific.
The difference here, Ash, is like this guy's TikTok, or like I'm a huge fan of Ronnie James Dio videos, particularly like Holy Diver, which has some heavy Hawk vibes as well. Maybe inspired that as well. I'm not sure. But I love that kind of stuff. Maybe not for an hour and a half, though. And what really powered me through this movie was the budget that they spent on hiring the one and only Harry Robertson, a.k.a. Lord Rockingham of the Lord Rockingham's 11, to do the soundtrack. I don't know if you guys picked up on how damn good this soundtrack was, because the film, not exactly quality. The soundtrack, it's energetic, it's wild, it's like bordering on disco, but not quite there, with some prog rock influences. So I started diving into this guy because I was fascinated. Like, who is the genius behind this? Is it a member of Queen? No. Lord Rockingham, Harry Robertson, he was going to be an archaeologist, and then he had really poor health. So he started teaching music. And then from there, he composed soundtracks going back into like the 50s, like the Vampire Lovers. He did some other ones like that. And then he was like a big band leader. And then to like finalize his empire, he married a baroness. I'm like, this guy sounds fucking fantastic. And the music, it shows.
Another influence. Ash, you will get this. And it was stuck in my head. I couldn't figure it out. Just listen. Watch. It is the way. It's the fucking Mandalorian. It's that same shit. Every time the Mandalorian walks in the door, it is the way. That's the fucking Mandalorian.
Alternative theory. It's not Hawk the Slayer influencing all these different things in the world, but rather that Hawk the Slayer is so derivative of the genre that it is an amalgam of all of these things that are pervasive in fantasy and sci-fi.
I'll buy that.
No.
As Voltan torments the whole countryside, a warrior named Ranulf escapes to a remote convent and is nursed back to health by the nuns, losing a hand in the process. Voltan calls out his wizard to stave off the pain he has in his wounded face. The wizard performs a spell on his face, telling him, "Your face will not pain you for a while, and there is one who stands between us and the final victory. You will prepare the way to his death."
So, Gene, as I'm watching it, I had a problem with the way the film was going. And your revelation that the magic component was added at the last minute makes sense, because it is one of the disjointed parts of the film that seems like it was edited to revolve around that. Because I can't help but feel this entire wizard plot line, it doesn't make real sense. I don't know what the nature of their relationship is. They spend more time with the brother versus brother rivalry and the love of the girlfriend and the father, which is less interesting to me. But the wizard thing, the relationship, I couldn't tell. Was that his servant, or was it more like a like a dark lord? Was he guiding Voltan? I couldn't tell. He fails to provide any assistance or guidance to Voltan. He's just there. He's forced in. We see him shouting at the cave. And I wanted to know more about that dynamic. But now that you've said, hey, this wasn't part of it, it makes sense because it feels forced.
I mean, what else do you need to know, right? Like, he's evil, so Voltan is evil. Like, Voltan is all scarred up, so he's in pain and evil, and the sorcerer makes his face a little bit better with his evilness, and he's got him in a grip. Like, what else do you need to know? Like, I was good with that. I had no questions.
I need to know what kind of crystal he's giving him.
I mean, a
I'm
sparkly
joking.
one.
I don't need to know about the crystal. I don't know. No,
Yeah.
but it makes sense because this is why I probably won't get a less than a 1 wipe is because there are plot holes in the film.
This is why.
This is why.
This
Got
is
it.
why.
Got it. This is where you drew the line. Well, I'll say this. I kind of totally dug the wizard part. I know the laughs again are a bit intentional, but the wizard scene, pretty badass. You get Voltan standing in front of that incredible cave with the red light behind it, and you get that staccato delivery of the way he calls him, Wizard! You promised me! Like, it's so good. I rewound it and watched it like 5 times, and I have a new quote where twice to my children this week I'll be like, Finnegan! Like, just like he says it here. It's great. And that's hilarious enough, like, on its own. But then you get like this very draggy, like, wizard outfit that's covered in glitter in front of this 80s music video backdrop. And then, like, it's very ABBA, where the perspective keeps changing between them. Like, you know how ABBA famously, like, they would be standing, if you guys can't see right now, but like Gene is going in profile. They literally would go like in profile and face one another, and then they would flip. And guys, this cut so abruptly, it felt like they were going to start doing Chiquitita or whatever that song is that they sing. And it's pretty amazing because I thought they were about to open into a love ballad, and I ate this shit up.
We saw this angling also at the beginning of The Warriors, and then you also see it in this movie with Crow. Anytime he like hears anything and wants to inform people, he's always looking somewhere else, and you just see a side profile. One man, horseback,
So
coming. But Ash, you mentioned the wizard's genius in this movie. Any moment where I said, wow, it always involved a wizard or a sorceress, because the sorceress that Hawk rescues, also Magenta from Rocky Horror Picture Show, apparently I started thinking about her magical powers because she's basically a walking Flaming Lips concert.
Yeah.
These are her powers if you haven't seen the movie. She can fire silly string, like shit tons of it. She can throw LED balls into a room. She's got CO2 cannons that like fog up the entire English countryside, and then neon teleportation rings. This, Big D, you need to get back into drugs. You need to watch this movie on them.
Does she have like sparklers or like different kind of snaps or other things? Because she does a lot of the it looks like a quick fire burst. It's some kind of pyrotechnics.
It was Job from Arrested Development. Like, it's the same technology.
Final countdown,
it's like, it's not a trick, it's an illusion. A trick is something a whore does for money, Michael. Like, like, that's what we get here. And y'all, like, I'm sorry. When he's in that cave and he's got, like, the disco rave hula hoops around him with that music of woo, 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 woo. And, like, his friends are just sitting there watching. Like, this shit is the kind of life I want to live.
Definitely.
Well, Voltan appears at the convent, interrupting the nuns' mass and kidnapping the abbess, demanding a large sum of gold as a ransom. After Voltan and his henchmen leave with the abbess, the nuns tell Ranulph to seek the High Abbot at the fortress of Danesford. The High Abbot tells him to find the warrior called Hawk. The High Abbot gives Ranulph a token to give to Hawk when he finds him. Traveling through the land, Hawk discovers Ranulph has been captured by brigands. He rescues him, and Ranulph convinces Hawk to rescue the abbess.
Okay, the brigands part. Like, first of all, like, the fact that we're calling them brigands, I have a problem with. But the brigands part, where they have this standoff with Hawk. If any of you guys know anyone who does LARPing, these guys remind them of some LARPers that I know. They're just standing there staring at one another for an inordinately long time. The chopping cuts goes from one face to another to another. And it's like either like low budget acting from Ren Fair or a LARPing event. And even the way they die with no blood and the way they clutch their chests like all dramatically for like exactly 2 seconds to allow for the most amount of drama before they fall down dead. Like, it's so bad.
Ash, did you notice that every time Hawk would teleport from the cave to gather another member of his 5th edition starter set party, the guy he's going to recruit is always in some kind of trouble. Mm-hmm. And it's always the same setup. I felt like I was watching like a weekly 30-minute series, right? Group of dudes threatening Hawk's friend, and then Hawk has got to step in, and then they got to solve the problem.
Well, you'll appreciate this as a D&D player, and anyone out there who plays D&D, tell me legit how many times when you were watching this, you're like, who the fuck is this dungeon master, and why does he suck at his fucking job?
Yes.
Because that's what it felt. It's like you got a bad DM who has no idea how to run a campaign that's just like throwing shit, and you got a random ass person who's playing a wizard for the first time, has no idea what kind of spells to, throw.
Yeah, I felt like they were going to have a holiday session where everyone needed to level up to like 8. So they needed to go through just a grind for XP. And so they were just throwing bodies at them. Yes. I just wanted one of these guys, when Hawk shows up, to just be chilling at home, like eating soup. Like not one of them is just having a normal day.
No, Gene, I think we answered the question why no one has a sheath. You have to carry your weapon. You have to be on guard at all time. It's the nature of their world. Danger is around every corner. Their life expectancy is probably very little. So at any moment, you could be dead. And everyone in this world, Gene, is a master at throwing knives, spears, anything. You could be killed at absolutely any moment.
Well, Hawk locates his old friends, Gort, a giant who wields a warhammer, Crow, an elf who uses a bow, and Balden, a dwarf skilled with a whip. The 5 warriors travel to the convent and fight Voltan's men. When Voltan still demands the ransom, Hawk steals the gold from a slave trader to pay it. Hawk and his team attack Voltan's camp to rescue the abbess, but fail. With his son slain, Voltan employs a turncoat nun to infiltrate the abbey and capture the heroes. A sorceress friend of Hawk's helps the heroes escape, but Balden is mortally wounded as a result.
Okay, so starting off with the weapon, with the Mind Stone, we're a little underwhelmed. The design leaves a little to be desired. And I'm thinking, I'm still anticipating there's going to be a moment where Hawk has to finally pull it out, and we're going to see this legendary Mind Stone blade in combat. And I'm confident this is going to turn the tide of some battle, maybe the whole war. There's going to be a moment at the end that this is going to be the ultimate weapon. It's going to just be the big bad. And I think we were equally disappointed in Krull. We never saw a training montage. We never knew what it could do. And we thought that would be the big turning the tide weapon. And it really didn't at the end. I mean, yes, it turned out you don't need the blade. You have the power in you all along.
I think we were disappointed in the lack of a montage. Is a bit of an overstatement, Big D. I think you were disappointed.
No, not the montage. I'm saying we were disappointed that the glaive, necessarily in the end, it wasn't the glaive. The power was in him to begin with, and he didn't need the glaive, even though he had lost it here. You think it's going to be this fucking sword? No. It's an old one-handed man, an elf named Crow. Those are the fuckers who are the ultimate weapon. These dudes are overpowered to the max. You don't need a magical sword. You don't need a knife. You don't need 1,000 goons. You don't need a castle. These dudes are shooting 100 arrows per minute with pinpoint accuracy. You put the 2 of these up on a tree or up on a wall, they could have personally held off Saruman's army at the siege of Helm's Deep. These fuckers were deadly, laying waste to everyone. There is no greater power in the world than these guys with some arrows.
Yeah, they really didn't need to involve Gort or Balden in this case. Balden is the only dwarf in cinema to wield a whip and wear no armor. And then Gort, he's a 6'7" giant who manages to get tied up twice in the same weekend. This is your muscle. And I started thinking, Ash, with Balden, I think he's a rogue halfling in reality. He's not a dwarf per se, but maybe the filmmakers were afraid that audiences, much like our listeners, wouldn't know what the fuck we're talking about. And they're like, yeah, it's a dwarf.
Did Gort look familiar to either of you?
No.
That was Cyclops in Krull.
Well, I guess he had another eye, and I didn't recognize him.
Didn't recognize you with that other eye.
No, but I am there with you, Gene, right? Here's the kind of, theme that's going through here is I'm telling you, this movie was made by a bunch of D&D nerds, which again, I love. I've been playing D&D since I was like 12 years old. I'm here for that. But they had no idea how to categorize these characters. And so all of their like strengths and weaknesses, like they make no sense. And let's just talk about the fact of when we meet him, like Baldwin is on that little thing, like tied up, about to be burned. And as soon as he sees Hawk, he's like, gets his arm loose, and then he's in the water and he hates the water. And he's got all these like half given lines, which you would hear in a game when somebody's trying to create a character, like when they're trying to give you their character backstory. I'm telling you, these are a bunch of D&D nerds.
Big D, you mentioned 100 arrows per minute with pinpoint accuracy, which sounds very cool. It does not look very cool on film.
No.
And we've covered plenty of movies with bad editing, but I'm not generally observant enough to notice it. With Hawk and these arrow scenes, I noticed it. The film is spliced together to make Crow appear like this lightning fast bowman. Ranulph's crossbow, as you mentioned, it's basically a Tommy gun. And the most perplexing moment of all, and I don't mean this from like a decisions that the director made, but like I was perplexed, is there's a scene where Hawk is planning to attack Voltan's camp. And he says, well, we need help from the woman, referring to the sorceress. So you think you might be getting another recruitment scene or they're going to hatch a plan? No, the film immediately cuts to Crow, slow motion jumping into a tree. And you could very much tell that it was a guy jumping out of a tree. Then they just reversed the film. There's smoke coming out of the sorceress, and then it's just all out medieval chaos.
Oh, come on. That's part of the charm. That is part of what makes this movie great. They said, let's make this movie. They had no business making this movie. None. But they're going to do it by all means possible. We've got a smoke machine. I got my pet snake on set. I have 4 foam skulls. Let's do it. And you talk about Crow, dude. What about the scenes where he's like hopping off of a trampoline and shooting, and they just keep doing it repeatedly like he's hopping? And he is so serious. He looks like a Vulcan elf. He has no humor. He didn't have words of wisdom. He was very deadpan and serious. But those cuts, they don't even show them drawing the arrow back. It's just shoo, 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 shoo. It's quaint.
It's so confusing, though, the first time he fires it when they're like out in the woods, because they're clearly made of plastic, first of all. And I was watching this again this week with like the commercials, where like you watch it for free on Amazon and they have commercials every 10 minutes. And I had already had this weird thing where it cut to a dog running and I thought it was still in the movie, but it wasn't. And then when that happened, I swear to God, I thought that it was a Nerf ad. Like I thought I had switched to like a, an ad for like a Nerf gun for Christmas. Like, y'all, it was bad.
And I want to start by saying slavery is bad, just categorically. But I don't know if we could really call our heroes good guys because they have to get the money for the ransom. And their solution for that is to go murder 20 men, mostly Crow, just shooting them from a fucking tree. They got snipers in the treetops. And these 20 men, we don't really establish like what their business there. Are they bodyguards for the slaver? Are they merchants there to make some purchases? I get that you execute the hunchback slaver. That's a given. Okay. Fuck you. That's justice. All right. But some of these other dudes, I'm pretty sure they were just there to like buy slaves. And we don't even know where these slaves came from. Like these could have been pedophiles. They could have been murderers. You don't really know, but we're going to rescue them and set them free on the countryside. Maybe that's why everyone's in danger.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 guys that we met at like that pub who are killed by Voltan, they just seem like regular dudes. They're like, listen, we work for the hunchback. Leave us alone, please. We're having lunch. We're eating. So maybe half of these 100 guys they killed were just dudes out there trying to make a living. They're trying to survive. So, Gene, you're right. But I think there's another villain in this film we're missing. The true villain in this is the church. It's organized religion. Voltan, he is backed by pure evil. This isn't just a guy who's trying to get control from money or whatever. He's kidnapping and murdering the staff of the convent. This would seem like a perfect time for the church and the leaders to, up at the High Abbot to be like, hey, let's take notice. They're coming after our business. And I understand the principle. You don't negotiate with terrorists. But come on, this is the moment. You got to validate your importance. You've been teaching about divine protection. What good is spiritual insurance if it's just going to get denied?
Big D, I recently learned that holy men back in the day, they were not supposed to have bodyguards or carry weapons or anything like that. Like they were supposed to be protected by God. And so their workaround solution was that they always had valets, but their valets were like skilled in weapons and hand-to-hand combat, and they would just roll with these. They were essentially bodyguards. The church in Hawk doesn't use that method of protection, but they do have a method of protection. It's impenetrable structures, because we learn that this abbey that the nuns live in, it could withstand an attack by thousands of men. The problem is that you can't trust the sisters themselves. The church is doing its job. It's giving them wonderful buildings. And they're not getting much help from the heroes either, because these are, bar none, the stupidest heroes we've ever seen in a movie, Big D. Voltan rides by himself to the abbey on a horse. No soldiers with him. No bodyguards. Crow, who has superhuman hearing, alerts the whole crew. He's one man alone on a horse. Then Voltan starts yelling from outside the abbey. He's like, I'm here by myself. All by myself. No army with me. Army's not going to be here till tomorrow when we come back to kill everybody. And then Hawk literally says, and I'm taking this from the movie, we are few and Voltan has many men. Dude, he doesn't right now. Fucking kill him.
Yeah, you can't even use these. They could have killed him with one arrow.
One arrow.
Maybe it was the principle. Maybe they need to have a fair fight. I don't know.
Crazy idea. Put Crow outside.
That's a good idea.
Fucking A.
That's a good idea.
When the heroes mount a final assault on the convent, Crow is wounded and Ranulph is killed. Hawk mows down Voltan's men until he confronts Voltan, who has taken Gort and the abbess's sisters prisoner. Hawk exchanges himself for the hostages, but uses a necklace from his wife and the mind sword to free Gort and kill Voltan. As Hawk and Gort head off to find new adventures, an evil wizard carries off Voltan's body.
So we've got this guy, Voltan, whose face won't heal and he's all deformed and he's very self-conscious. So he wears his like very, masculine silver helmet, covers like half his face, like the Phantom of the Opera. And the whole movie, it's like, you want to kind of get a good look at like, what's going on underneath there. And I don't know about y'all, but I love a good deformed face reveal. I already mentioned Phantom. It's my favorite part of Phantom when she rips it off and he looks all cuckoo underneath. And I was excited because, we were going to get to see this never healing face moment. And I have to say, it's a pretty good one. Like they clearly had a decent makeup artist on set. It looks mangly. It looks wet. Looks like it smells probably pretty bad. Thought it was badass. But then I kind of got bummed because I realized at this point, like we barely got any time with Voltan. And I think Voltan was a much cooler dude than Hawk. Hawk annoyed the shit out of me. I think Voltan was a lot more interesting and I wish we'd gotten a little bit more FaceTime with him.
I want to make it clear to the audience that this Jack Palance is not the Jack Palance of City Slickers. The Jack Palance of City Slickers is very entertaining. This Jack Palance, he does not belong in fantasy films. When we finally see Voltan fight, I think we quickly learn why he didn't get more screen time. He is an objectively bad swordsman. This might be the worst swordplay I've seen since I joined this podcast. And Hawk is no Errol Flynn, but a half-blind Jack Palance was painful to watch, just lumbering around the screen, swinging the sword with no sheath.
Yeah, but I think that also says more about Jack's career. In the 50s, he had been nominated for a few Academy Awards, and he had made some big movies. The 80s were dark times. That was before City Slickers with 92. So at that point, Jack did not want to be doing this film. He had done, I think he did also, he was in Batman, the first Tim Burton Batman. But there was dark days where he did not want to be filming this. I don't blame him.
Ash, I will say that I was relieved because I think a couple times in the film they called him like Skullface or something like that.
Yeah,
and
Skullface.
I was really worried that when that helmet came off, it would be like some bad mask with like half skeleton and then half whatever. Yeah. It looked good.
It did.
I think if the people of this time or in this film had embraced science, like when the witch had just tried to heal the animals with simple science and they wouldn't let it. Why could you not heal that face?
Because it was a magical injury.
You got a sorcerer. Isn't it his job to fix it?
He was zapped or some shit, and that's why the wizard has to put his glitter sparkles on it and make him feel better.
Yeah, the wizard is like his pusher, like he needs to keep him coming back for more so he keeps doing evil.
Yes.
He's like Emperor Palpatine. This is very derivative from Star Wars.
So I'm worried because we're at the end here, and I know where you guys are going to go. So I want to make one last attempt. Please, I want to plead to the jury of Shat. Ladies and gentlemen, please, we are here at the end. And before you come with your verdict about Hawk the Slayer, I want to make one last plea on your sense. Please remember what this movie is. This is a movie with sometimes, in some of the cases of the films that we've reviewed, like 1/20th of the budget. More than that. It is minuscule. Let's not forget what it has going for it. I think there are, yes, they don't meet what the traditional D&D characters and abilities and whatever the hell your fucking roll numbers and all that shit, but they're fun together. You got Crow and Baldwin shooting the shit. You got Gort the Giant, Volton and Hawk. They're memorable characters. And this is a crafty group of filmmakers. They dared to make a fantasy film when they had no business even trying. And it makes sense. They started the film without the magic. It got thrown in there. But you have to give them credit. Don't hold this as some of the other ones. And I want to just give you an idea. We're talking under $1 million. And just to give you some perspective, The Neverending Story, 20 times the budget. The Princess Bride, 16 times the budget. Labyrinth, 25 times the budget. Conan, 20 times. The Dark Crystal, 25 times. Legend, 30. Willow, 35 times the budget. Krull, 27 times the budget. This movie, you cannot say this is a 5-wiper when you gave it to Krull. This cannot be proportionally per dollar. I think per dollar spent, this movie's gold.
Following your logic, though, if this movie had 30 times the budget, it would have to be better.
Yes.
And that's wrong because let's say you take the budget and you make the effects look great. Let's say you take the budget and you improve the casting. Let's take the budget and let's improve the dialogue, right? Do any of those things. Hawk the Slayer is still a bad movie because it has a bad story. The ransom makes no sense. They say repeatedly that if we pay them or not, he's still going to kill her. Well, then why are we paying them at all? Why bother go killing the slavers and get 2,000 gold coins that you just end up donating to the church? It makes no sense. Why do they keep bouncing back and forth to the Abbey? They're in the Abbey, they're out of the Abbey. You have a stronghold. You leave it to raid the camp. You don't finish the job. Then you come back. Then you abandon it. Then you come back to it again. It makes no sense.
Well, and let's not forget how this all starts. It all starts because Voltan wants the super fist sword, right? And then Hawk gets it. And then we never come back to why Voltan wants the super fist sword. Why did he kill his dad over the sword, right? And I understand, yes, he's bad, he's mean, he's evil, but you've got all of these storylines that kind of coalesce. And also, is Hawk his real brother? I want to know their backstory. Do they have separate moms? Do they come from the same family? I have so many questions.
Yeah, Ash, I'm going to add 3 points that you just made very clear to me, which is this movie could have been a ransom movie where they got to get the money together, right? It could have been a love story or a retribution, right? Because of the wife, Elaine, being killed. Or it could have been the battle for this sword. And instead, it was trying to be all three, but none of them made sense. There was no actual clear line of motivation for the characters. And I'm also not sure what that Green Forest was about.
The defense rests.
No, but that's why my first $1 million is going to go to writers. I'm going to get writers
to write a different movie.
No, they could just let's just say they're going to polish up the script. They're going to put a treatment on it, Gene.
I could make this argument for any bad movie, though. Listen, I know you're saying it's a bad movie, but if we'd spent some money and we improved what happened on screen, got a better cast, rewrote the movie, you got to admit it's a pretty good movie.
Call it something different.
Call it something different.
Hawk the Destroyer. Hawk the Destroyer.
There you go. There you go. That was what they had planned, I bet, but never quite happened. Anyway, now is the time of the podcast where we give our Shat score for Hawk the Slayer. The Shat score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It's when you think you're eating turgles, but they're just sugared nuts. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a movie. It's when the woman you love leaves you for your brother who is somehow 30 years younger. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Hawk the Slayer?
I really wrestled with this one, guys, and let me tell you why I'm torn. At the end of the day, I thought this movie was charming, and the way it would be if a group of your nerdy friends who were my favorite people in the world that are into D&D got together for a long weekend in the woods, got some beers, made a movie together of a campaign that we recently completed. I think that would be badass. And I think it would be really fun to have that bad movie to look back on and laugh at and have that memory together. But I would never expect the general public to watch that movie. And I would never expect for it to make sense to anyone who wasn't a part of it, right? So while I love that piece, which felt like strangely nostalgic to me, felt really warm and gooey inside because of it, unfortunately, that's not what this movie is. It's an actual movie that had an actual budget that non-nerds actually made. And because of that, it's kind of awful as a result. Is it the worst thing I've seen? No, it is not. I love what you guys do where, if it's not wholly offensive, it's not a 5 white movie for me, right? Like this movie's not hurting anybody at the end of the day. And I think it's saved from the worst fate because I did laugh my way through it. So I can't say I didn't enjoy it, but it's not a great movie. It's 4 wipes.
All right. That's 4 wipes from Ash. Ash, I'm going to echo pretty much everything you said, but just come down a little more harshly on it. Now, the worst score I've ever given was for Student Bodies, and that was 5 wipes because it was stupid, it was poorly made, and it was offensive. And I don't mean guys offensive in like the social justice warrior way. I mean, it was offensive because it was like their attempts at humor were solely invested in just shitting on people, and that didn't really do anything for me. So that's the worst it could be. I'm going to say this is in the same range as like a Masters of the Universe, right? Or a Krull. For me, it's 4 3/4 wipes, Big D. I know that that you feel like I should weigh that a little bit differently based on the budget, but I say nay. 4.75 wipes.
Okay, so Gene, for reference, you gave Krull 4.75.
Yeah.
And you gave Willow 4.5.
Uh-huh.
So you stand by that.
Fire mares.
And again, I think that was more egregious because they should have been better. This movie had no business being this good. And what I know it's not scientific, but I go off of how I feel once the movie's over. I laughed in this film. The adventure was stupid. Is it a good movie? No, but it was enjoyable. If I was a kid in 1980 watching it, I would have left the theater being like, wow, that was kind of a dumb adventure, but it was cool. I felt the exact same way today. I went into it knowing what it was, and I think it was. I think it was an average, like bottom of the barrel, like low budget fantasy adventure that I can't flaw for the budget and what came out, and I felt good watching it. 2.5 wipes.
So this movie's better than Lost Boys.
It's a different. It's again, we can't. We debate this all the time. We debate like you can't start comparing movies. Like, sometimes we're talking. You can't compare Dumb and Dumber, let's say, to Amistad or to Schindler's List, or that you can't compare. All movies are not equal.
I think
I was more tolerant of this. I was more tolerant of this. Okay. I felt good with it. It was an average, stupid movie, but I had a lot of fun.
All right. Well, 2.5 wipes. What's there going?
I can't defend it. I know it doesn't make sense. It's not great. It's not going to win awards. But in the end, I bet you everybody had a good time making it, and I had a good time watching it. And I cannot wait to do the Rifftrax.
So 2.5 wipes from Big D, 4 wipes from Ash, and 4.75 wipes from me. That gives us an average wipe score of 3.75 wipes for Hawk the Slayer.
Again, it always seems to happen. This now ties it with some very similar films in a lot of ways. In the 270 spot with Labyrinth, Robin Hood Men in Tights, Lady Hawk, and Ice Pirates.
Yes, that feels exactly right.
Feels like where it should be.
Yeah.
I would say all of those are better than this movie.
I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I mean, I did enjoy watching it. It was fine, but it's bad.
Yeah, I don't care which is on the top of the pile, but this is on that same shelf in the video store. So I'm okay with that.
And it's always going to have the tape behind the box because nobody knew this movie existed. So
very true.
Feels
That's
exactly
why
right.
Joe can go find it and watch it with Grandma.
All right, Joe. Thank you so much for commissioning Hawk the Slayer among your 3 commissions. And happy birthday to Grandma Iris. And as a special treat, we have a voicemail from your countryman, Steve, in Essex, who wants to talk about The Long Good Friday.
Hi, Shat Crew. This is Steve from Essex in the UK. And after much pondering and procrastination, I thought I'd finally send you my first voice message. And it was your review of The Long Good Friday that prompted me to do so. It's a film that was an absolute staple in our house growing up. My dad had recorded it onto VHS. He had taken the tab out. It was clearly marked that we were never allowed to record over it. And it was a film that we watched almost religiously 2 or 3 times a year. And it's one that I'd say was a real true representation of what East London was like back in the day. One of the scenes that you missed in your review is a scene that still horrifies me to this day, and that's where they took a machete to the poor guy's backside in his kitchen. And it was one of those scenes again where they never actually showed you what was going on, but it was the noise of the machete slicing through skin that was more terrifying than anything else. But a great film, great review, really enjoyed it. I did just want to take a slight umbrage with one of your comments though on the recording, and that was the phrase "go to London to drink some warm beer."
Oh.
Come on, guys. It's not warm beer. It's cask beer. And it is the pinnacle of the brewer's art. In fact, it is a style of beer that is revered by many American craft breweries. And when their brewers come over, all they want to do is they want to search out cask beer to taste how wonderful it is. How do I know so much about this? I host a little podcast here in the UK called The Beer O'Clock Show. I've been doing that for 11 years. So I think I know a bit or two about beer. And I'd like to say to you chaps, if you ever do come over to London, I would love to be your personal tour guide and take you to some of the best drinking holes and watering spots that the city has to offer. You can try some of our warm beer. You can try some of the best craft brews in the world. So hit me up. You'll know where to find me. It's Beer O'Clock Show. And you can come on over and I'll show you around. Finally, just wanted to say, as many people do, absolutely miss Ash these days. She was a real addition to your show. She really bought something, and I hope she's doing well, and hopefully we'll hear her back in the future. Anyway, keep up the good work, chaps. Loving what you're doing. And yeah, cheers from the UK.
So, Steve, I think you're mainly responding to my comments. So I'm going to take these in order. First, regarding slicing up butts, Big D did refer to the slicing up butts that Razor did in the film. However, we didn't really cling to that point that much. I think it's just because as Americans, we're desensitized to violence of all kinds. Slicing up a dude's butt with a machete is just like NBD to us. And as an American who visited London recently, I want to talk about the cask beer. Now, I'm told that if you have a cask beer that tastes flat and kind of muddy, that means that it wasn't handled correctly or done correctly, in which case every single pub I went to in London did not do a very good job of handling or serving their cask beer. I'm familiar with it. My other complaint with the English style of beer is the alcohol content is too damn low. I don't want to waste the calories, the money, and the volume of space in my stomach on a 3% beer. I just don't. It's ridiculous. England needs to grow up a little bit, pump up that ABV. Some of the breweries, like Brewdog, are doing a good job of that. And I don't want to badmouth Fuller's. I don't want to say like it's dog shit or like that. I'll still drink it. It's beer after all. And one last note, Steve, I did try to check out the Beer Clock podcast. It looks like Shat the Movies didn't intervene quickly enough because your last episode looks like it came out in like February. So it's been a minute since you guys put anything out. I know that you also have your additional podcast, Del Boca Vista. So loved listening. Would love to hear more. And always remember, it's those first 50 episodes you got to get through. And then it starts to click. So keep on keeping on.
Yeah, and thanks so much for your kind words. You know, we're recording this exactly 2 days after Eternal Sunshine came out, which is the first pod that I've been back on in a while. And thanks to you and thanks to just everybody for all the kind things that you have to say. I'm sure the 1-star reviews will roll in eventually for sure. But, you know, I love each and every one of you. And it's just, it's nice to hear from you all again. And I'm sorry, though, I do have to stick with Gene here. The British beers are just not my thing. Can't do it. It just feels like, what's the point? They're so low in alcohol content. I have to drink so much, and it just feels like warm bread.
Big D, are you still living the clean life over there in Florida?
Yeah, still living the clean life, yeah.
What would a 3% beer do?
I just wouldn't waste the time on it.
Warm bread. That's what it is.
I'll be honest with you. I'm sorry, but I'm not one of those like people are offering me like an alcohol-free beer. No, why would I do that? It's not like I enjoy the taste of the beer. I usually drink for the effect of it.
Are you doing like caffeine-free soda?
I'm drinking decaf right now. It's like
right,
2
exactly.
milligrams.
So how
of
is that
caffeine.
any different than a non-alcoholic beer?
Because fine.
He
I
needs
kind
the
of
coffee
enjoy
to
the
warm
taste
his
of coffee.
insides.
Yes,
Well, you could do that with the warm beer. Steve's telling us that,
My
right?
cast beer, yeah. Not yet. I'm not at that point yet.
Anyway, Steve, if you have any recommendations you want to write in, host at shatpod.com, please do, and I will happily try anything. Obviously, I can't get it cask here very easily, but if it's anything outside of Boddington's, Old Speckled Hen, Fuller's, something I might not have tried before that might change my mind, I'm here for you. And thank you for your voicemail. If you'd like to send us a voicemail, go to shatpod.com, use the SpeakPipe feature. We'd love to hear from you. Big D, what movie we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week. Lovable Englishman Charles and his group of friends seem to be unlucky in love. When Charles meets a beautiful American named Carrie at the wedding, he thinks his luck may have changed. But after one magical night, Carrie returns to the state, ending what might have been. As Charles and Carrie's paths continue to cross over a handful of nuptials and one funeral, he comes to believe that they are meant to be together, even if the timing always seems to be off. And this was commissioned by Joe T.
All right, Joe. Well, thank you for Hawk the Slayer, and thank you for our upcoming commission. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Email us, host@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next time for the following movie.
There are one or two things you need for a successful wedding. Tact.
So, John, how's that gorgeous girlfriend of yours?
She's no longer my girlfriend.
Ah, dear. Still, I wouldn't get too gloomy about it. Rumour has it she never stopped bonking old Toby Delisle just in case you didn't work out.
She is now my wife.
A discreet best man.
When Bernard told me he was getting engaged to Lydia, I congratulated him because all his other girlfriends have been such complete dogs. Although, may I say how delighted we are to have so many of them here this evening.
Delightful guests.
How do you do? My name's Charles.
Don't be ridiculous. Charles died 20 years ago.
It must be a different Charles, I think.
Are you telling me I don't know my own brother?
No.
An experienced vicar.
Who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Goat. Ghost.
And a loving bride.
I do.
A film with a message. Don't get married. Unless you fall recklessly in love.
I feel it in my finger. I feel it in my toe.
What do you think?
Divine.
Love is all around me, and so the feeling grows.
Hugh Grant and Andy McDowell invite you to 4 Weddings and a Funeral from the creators of Enchanted April and Blackadder.
May Almighty God bless you all, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Bravo!